So let's review an example, right? And I'm sure this example never happens in today's environment, and I'll just go ahead and start it. So here's Abe. Abe's having a bad day. He just got notice of the loss of his job, right? What we want to do is we want to create a customized work plan, right, to reduce the overall time of unemployment and lost income. So we can have Abe back to work quickly. You're going to replace Abe with whoever you want. So we're going to start with the employment department. I notice you have several. You have the labor department, agricultural labor department, you have the California employment department, et cetera, et cetera. But as you walk through and you look at the different steps, and these are macro steps, this is not a journey map by any stretch of the imagination, right? The key thing that we want to target here is less than 30 minutes. So from the time that Abe gets his box of stuff and gets escorted out the door, Abe has a job inquiry. Now, how does this actually work? So we're going to start with ambition, right? That's stage one portion. That's before the design. We're going to whiteboard it. We're going to get in a room. We're going to draw it out. You're going to use collaboration. You're going to do it however you're going to do it, right? However you can get together to do this. This is not a one-person show. This is getting different types of people in the room to understand what is it that we actually want to do. So we have some guidelines, right? There's a catalyst, something that happens, a trigger. There are things that are involved. They could be room sensors, they could be kiosks, they could be watches, they could be iPhones, they could be Android phones, they could be almost anything, right, that has a mind of its own. There's business processes that are involved. There's people involved, whether they're employees or whether they're citizens or partners or contractors or whatever the case may be. There's government entities involved. Notice I said entities because now we're going to do some cross-case management, right? And then there's education, which could be private or public or contract. So we begin by creating a catalyst. That catalyst is the fact that the employer initiates a workforce reduction, a pink slip, if you will. And everybody's seen that. And what happens next? Well, what we want to have happen next is the employment department receives an indication of the affected workers. This could be state, could be city, could be county, but they receive some type of notice from the business that there's been a reduction in force. That requires a partnership. It might require an agreement, probably does, right? Constructs a profile, an anonymous profile of the people who are being let go. That anonymous profile is then sent to an online service. In the prior slide, it was called Ceridian, which is a fictitious name that we created. But it's sent to an analytics as a service function. And they look at these profiles, and they aggregate them, and they massage them. They say, hey, they have these skills, they need these skills, there's these types of things. And those skill sets get transmitted to regional job postings. So the process pulls out regional job offerings, which require some geospatial, require some geographic components about where the person lost their job. In addition, some social networks are surveyed, right? And while you're probably thinking Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and those types of things, there's other types of social networks, monster.com and LinkedIn and a whole series of them. I'm not endorsing any of them, by the way. But there's a whole series of social networks that can provide job listings based upon the profiles that are provided. So there's an ecosystem with that partner again. Some API calls that are involved, right? Some technical pieces where I share anonymous data with you and you give me data back as far as what types of jobs are available. Remember our time frame that we're looking for. We're looking for 30 minutes from start to finish. Next, hey, maybe poor old Abe hadn't been to school in a while and just kind of was in a rut, and that's the reason he was let go to start with. So now Abe receives some type of, hey, here's a free class on project management, or here's a free class on being a CISSP, or here's a free class on basket weaving, or whatever the case may be, right? Now Abe can possibly pick up some additional skills. By the way, the state's going to know about that because it's part of his profile. And that profile then is sent to the employment department, which calculates his benefits. Now, Abe has opted in. Remember that sharing of data that we talked about early on? Abe has opted in so that he receives a special notice. And oh, by the way, he signs a consent form to have his unemployment check directly deposited into his bank account. There's also a survey. Are you happy? Are you sad? Do you need counseling? Do you not need counseling? All these types of things are taking place. Next, we have the employment department is ready to establish a direct deposit account with Abe's bank for the unemployment check. So all this is taking place within a 30-minute window. This is the fun part, by the way, for me. A personalized return to work plan is generated, including other ways to get by. What I mean by that is maybe Abe, who took the rideshare to work this morning, maybe he gets a note saying, hey, rideshare company A or B is hiring in your area. Do you own a car? Or perhaps Abe has a truck. Hey, Roadie, which is a haul your stuff as I'm going in that direction company, sends them a note saying, hey, sign up for Roadie 2 while you're at it, and sign up for package delivery, and do you have extra storage space in your house? Yes, I have extra storage space in my house. Leave me alone. I don't want to drive people around. I don't want to deliver food, right? But I do have, I live in a 3-bedroom house, and everything's empty except the room that I live in, okay? Well, the next thing that's going to happen is the geospatial is going to determine where he is. He's going to get a job offer. Now, this is outside the 30-minute window, right? But at least he will know from his apps where he can go. And as he goes to the job interview that he has, and as he goes through, he's able to basically NFC, for those people who are aware of the technology, the kiosk, and get his ticket waived. Or perhaps he needs a ride, and it's less than the cost of a train, so the state sends him a one-time use promo code so that he can do the ride share for $4 or $3 or whatever the case may be. So this is an important portion. As we go through, the things begin to get integrated. And then lastly, poor Abe, he's having a hard time interviewing. He is taking classes, though, to improve himself. Now he says, I've got a room to let, and I've got extra storage space. And he gets put on those applications that he has. Now, the right side of this, if you will, the right side of this all takes place within 30 minutes. Having an understanding that Abe lost his job, here's his profile, here's a profile of people that look like him and do what he does, here's the jobs that are available, here's the request to create an account, a direct deposit account, and here's a list of applications. Oh, by the way, Abe, since you filled out our survey that said you had extra space and you had a car and a truck, we thought you might be able to use these applications because they provide some level of revenue into your environment. You could offshoot this and you could change this thought process as much as you wanted to, but the idea is to have an idea of what you want to accomplish and how you enable the person, not the IT system, not the business product, right, or process, but you enable the person to become more productive, whatever they're doing. If they're doing driver's licenses, if they're doing income tax, if they're doing whatever the case is that they're doing, there is an ability to integrate that with your ecosystem of partners on existing IT systems and new IT systems. Remember, in the very near future, most new stuff is going to be cloud-based anyway. So by definition, it's probably going to have integration points that you can latch onto. And as we come through, though, you got to keep in mind of who benefits. Who actually benefits from all this? So we like to think of it in two axes, if you will, improving the personal effectiveness, how Abe gets better, if you want to think of it like that. And on the left-hand side, on the vertical, improving the efficiency, or in the case of IT, improving the ROI of what you're providing, right? In these 4 quadrants, we kind of have the enabler. This is things that enable all these functions. What do we need just to survive, right? Can we get away with cloud? Can we get away with the existing system? Do we have identity management system that handles all this? What about the bank transaction? What about the geospatial thing? Sending information back and forth to find out where Abe actually lives and wants to get a job, those kind of things. Then we also have the corporate green light. What do we need to improve at? And it says compete and improve because you sort of are competing in a way. with other services? And what systems have a direct impact on the process? So if you think about the job loss scenario, what currently takes place in a job loss, what systems, as we were talking about them, would impact that process? And where would they impact them? And how can they either accelerate them when they're good or improve them when they're not so good? Likewise, Abe asked, what's in it for me? Or WIFM, right? What is in it for me? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to give up my data? Well, because you might have a job offer within 45 minutes. That would be a good reason, right? These are the personal productivity, and Abe is used to using consumer-based devices. So Abe is expecting consumer-based interactions with the state and with businesses and everything else. And lastly, what do we need to win? How do we both gain improvements in efficiency, but also in the effectiveness by which we're supporting the citizens through platforms? So I want to remind you of our quadrant that we had, right? Enablers, infrastructure, but there's a whole series of things that we can look at from platform standpoint to put in there, whether it's multi-enterprise MDM or federated identity management, identity access, mobility architecture, virtual directories. There's a whole series of capabilities that kind of fall in that bucket of what do we need just to get by. Now what's important to understand is the color of the circles indicates the maturity. So 2 of those are red, right? So mobility architectures are beginning to be formulated, and you can begin to buy them as a service, which is a good thing, right? Federated identity management, virtual directories, and identity proofing, those are things that are supposed to be in place. They're mature, they're commoditized. If you don't have them, you probably should have them or have some inkling of why you would want to use them, right? Because they're not going to change that much as time goes on. We can do this for each quadrant. Whether it's API-enabled ecosystems, remember that partner ecosystem that we were talking about? Red dot, orange dots with business process as a service. That analytics as a service, that's probably a business process as a service. They're just taking information. You're not doing anything other than providing them anonymized information, and they're feeding you back profiles, right? Hiring profiles. Cloud-based business rules and business rules management. I'll work my way through here. Citizen EID, right? Electronic ID for citizens. Pretty interesting thing. Might allow Abe to bypass the kiosk at the train station as he goes through, because now we have a way of identifying Abe as opposed to everybody else. Customer best next action. It's pretty important to gain an understanding of what's the best next thing to do, right? These are all platforms that are becoming available. And then lastly, Business Transformation Office, predictive analytics, right? And smart advisors and a whole bunch of other items in here like cross-agency case management. Wouldn't it be nice if the education department knew ahead of time what to educate Abe on, right, as he's being laid off, so that he would be prepared for the next job, because there is a job profile that says people with this type of job has this type of education. It's an interesting approach, something that can be applied quite rapidly. So we're probably going to end early, which is a good thing. I'll take a little bit of Q&A. I haven't gotten the 10, 5, and 15 numbers yet, but as we go through, there are some things I want to remind you of. Those things are: determine the overall vision for your organization. What do you want to be, as I tell some of my clients, what do you want to be when you grow up? And pretend you're that, right? Pretend you are the best provider of services. I am the best provider of employment services because I have the following types of things in my toolkit. And then figure out how to ideate civic moments to leverage those tools, right? We just ran through an example. You can do this on your own. You can do it on the back of a sheet of paper. You can do it almost anywhere, right? And then design the solution that's small enough to actually get done, but not so large that it takes 4 versions of an RFP to get through. and takes 18 months to get through, because then you're beginning to get at the point of diminishing return. Deploy that minimum viable product to test the outcomes that you're expecting. And then once you have a viable outcome, prepare to scale it. That's where that cloud solution will come in handy, that IT system that helps you scale. The API systems help you to integrate amongst your partners, right? You have to know what your customers, in your case, the citizens and other agencies, need. You have to have the information that you need to manage that decision that you're making. There's going to be things involved. Crowd control, car control, right? Traffic control, as we talked about. There's all sorts of ways and varieties to invent the future, which is really what you're trying to do. You're not trying to roll out a new set of servers. You're trying to roll out a new way of doing a particular business function that enables the citizen and provides a shortcut to that. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to go to a black screen if I can get there, and open the floor for a few questions. I know I'm between the award ceremony, I believe, which is down where you had the lunch, which is next, and then happy hour. I'm always in front of happy hour for some reason. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but open for questions. And as I have the microphone, I'll be happy to take any questions to answer, and if I can't answer them, I'll take them and take it for action. Anybody? Okay, I'll ask one. And this is, you don't have to show your hands if you don't want to. Who enjoyed this? Oh, you have a question.
How's the enterprise cloud service now? There's, AWS, Lambda, as well as Zero Function, Google Cloud Function. How does it play into this?
So the question was, how do the cloud providers play into the overall solution? Is that?
Well, I mean, like the bleeding edge technology, like AWS Lambda, Zero Functions, and Google Cloud Function that take advantage of those to be utilized in some of this concept.
So there's either the thought process of scalability, right, and or immediacy. Okay, so the closer you get to sort of the very compressed time period, like the 30-minute piece, means that the integration between AWS or whoever you're working with needs to be set up so it handles at that same speed. The last thing you want to do is handle a handoff that you're waiting for the information. So if the analytics as a service is the slow cog in the chain, then you want to work to ensure that they speed up at the same time. The nice part is as one service accelerates, right, typically the services around it accelerate, meaning that as one technology as a service is provided, adjacent technologies as a service also tend to accelerate at the same rate. Things that are commoditized, like cloud storage now, at one point in time that was changing rapidly, and if you held your breath for 2 days, the price would go down, right? Did you do that? So, sort of the answer to the question that, I was going to sing a song. The answer to the question you have, my friend, is the thought process that when you design the civic moment, think in terms of the consumer of the service instead of the point of thought around, the point of view around the technology. So, my wife and I use smartphones. We have two very different smartphones. I'm always on whatever's new and greatest, and I'm willing to try applications and turn them down and delete them and try again and turn them down and delete them, which results in a refresh every year. She's on the same phone now for 5 years. And I have to literally take her phone away from her to update it to the latest version of the OS. Right? So take into consideration the speed at which the point of view of the consumer of whatever it is that you're doing has. I must be bumping something. What's that? It's haunted. It is haunted. I don't know if that really answers your question, but what you really have to contend with, and I'll use a Gartner term, and hopefully some of you have heard of it, is bimodal, right? So you're going to have some types of technologies that are moving extremely fast. They're changing, they're providing services at an ever-increasing rate, and you're going to have other technologies and other services that kind of churn along. You know, they have a every 2-week change request, and they're just moving along, and they're not changing, they're not updating. Well, in today's world, both of those environments have to exist in the same organization, right? And you're going to have to contend with the differences in governance styles. You're going to have to contend with the differences in technology, right? As it relates to those. What we described here is sort of a mode 2, the fast and furious version of an environment. But if you think about it, the direct deposit, that was old school, right? That's traditional. The transition between the analytics as a service and the employment department, that's probably fairly new, right? To send out profiles of employees that have just been terminated out to an analytics engine to have it come back with profiles for hiring. That's probably a new service, so expect it to change and be willing to change with it. The key point, and one of the reasons I put the cloud piece up early on in the assumptions, was as the cloud becomes more and more adopted, and I know I'm using the cloud term very generally, but as anything as a service becomes more and more acceptable, right, the rate of change associated with that also becomes more and more acceptable. But at the same time, with older systems and systems that don't have that, there's a disconnect. Was that my beep? So I hope that sort of answers. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.